share this link around some places. We've had one playback. Probably mine. Not on purpose. Time to continue reading. The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. I might ought to turn the music down a bit, eh? Like there, maybe. How's that? That's probably all right. I think. Let me move closer to the mic. All right. Chapter 43. The Friday Night Solution. I got tenure a year earlier than most people usually do. That seemed to impress other junior faculty members. "Wow, you got tenure early," they would say to me. "What was your secret?" I said, "It's pretty simple. Call me any Friday night in my office at 10 o'clock and I'll tell you." Of course, this was before I had a family. A lot of people want a shortcut. I find the best shortcut is the long way, which is basically 2 words: work hard. As I see it, if you work more hours than somebody else, during those hours you learn more about your craft. That can make you more efficient, more able, even happier. Hard work is like compounded interest in the bank. The rewards build faster. The same is true in your life outside of your job. All my adult life, I've felt drawn to ask long-married couples how they were able to stay together. All of them said the same thing. We worked hard at it. End of chapter 43. Chapter 44. Show Gratitude. Not long after I got tenure at the University of Virginia, I took my entire 15-person research team down to Disney World for a week as my way of saying thank you. A fellow professor took me aside and said, "Randy, how could you do that?" Perhaps he thought I was setting a precedent that others soon-to-be tenured professors would be unwilling to equal. "How could I do that?" I answered. "These people just worked their butts off and got me the best job in the world for life. How could I not do that?" So the 16 of us headed down to Florida in a large van. We had a complete blast, and I made sure we all got some education with our entertainment too. Along the way, we stopped at various universities and visited computer research groups. The Disney trip was gratitude easily delivered. It was a tangible gift, and it was perfect because it was an experience I could share with people I cared about. Not everyone is so easily thanked, however. One of my greatest mentors was Andy Van Dam, my computer science professor when I was at Brown. He gave me wise counsel. He changed my life. I could never adequately pay him back, so I just have to pay it forward. I always liked telling my students, go out and do for others what somebody did for you. Riding down to Disney World, talking to my students about their dreams and goals, I was trying my best to do just that. End of Chapter 44. Chapter 45. Send out Thin Mints. As part of my responsibilities, I used to be an academic reviewer. That meant I'd have to ask other professors to read densely written research papers and review them. It could be tedious, sleep-inducing work. So I came up with an idea. I'd send a box of Girl Scout Thin Mints with every paper that needed to be reviewed. "Thank you for agreeing to do this," I'd write. "The enclosed Thin Mints are your reward, but no fair eating them until you review the paper." That put a smile on people's faces, and I never had to call and nag them. They had the box of Thin Mints on their desks. They knew what they had to do. Sure, sometimes I had to send a reminder email, but when I'd ping people, all I needed was one sentence. Did you eat the Thin Mints yet?" I have found Thin Mints are a great communication tool. They're also a sweet reward for a job well done. Chapter 46. All you have is what you bring with you. I've always felt a need to be prepared for whatever situation I found myself in. When I leave the house, what do I need to bring? When I teach a class, what questions should I anticipate? When I'm preparing for my family's future without me, what documents should I have in place? My mother recalls taking me to a grocery store when I was 7 years old. She and I got to the checkout counter, and she realized she had forgotten a couple of items on her shopping list. She left me with the cart, and she ran off to get what she needed. "I'll be right back," she said. She was gone just a few minutes, but in that time I had loaded all the items on the belt and everything was rung up. I was left staring at the cashier, who was staring at me. The cashier decided to make sport of the situation. "Do you have money for me, son?" she said. "I'll need to be paid." I didn't realize she was just trying to amuse herself, so I stood there mortified and embarrassed. By the time my mom returned, I was angry. "You left me here with no money. This lady asked me for the money and I had nothing to give her." Now that I'm an adult, you'll never catch me with less than $200 in my wallet. I want to be prepared in case I need it. Sure, I could lose my wallet or it could be stolen, but for a guy making a reasonable living, $200 is an amount worth risking. By contrast, not having cash on hand when you need it is potentially a much bigger problem. I've always admired people who are over-prepared. In college, I had a classmate named Norman Meyerowitz. One day, he was giving a presentation on an overhead projector, and in the middle of his talk, the light bulb on the projector blew out. There was an audible groan from the audience. We'd have to wait 10 minutes till someone found a new projector. "It's okay," Norm announced. "There's nothing to worry about." We watched him walk over to his knapsack and pull something out. He had brought along a spare bulb for the overhead projector. Who would even think of that? Our professor, Andy Van Dam, happened to be sitting next to me. He leaned over and said, "This guy's going places." He had that right. Norm became a top at Macromedia Inc., where his efforts have affected almost everyone who uses the internet today. Another way to be prepared is to think negatively. Yes, I'm a great optimist, but when trying to make a decision, I often think of the worst-case scenario. I call it the eaten by wolves factor. If I do something, what's the most terrible thing that could happen? Would I be eaten by wolves? One thing that makes it possible to be an optimist is if you have a contingency plan for when all hell breaks loose. There are a lot of things I don't worry about because I have a plan in place if they do. I've often told my students, when you go into the wilderness, the only thing you can count on is what you take with you. And essentially, the wilderness is anywhere but your home or office. So take money. Bring your repair kit. Imagine the wolves. Pack a light bulb. Be prepared. Chapter 47. A bad apology is worse than no apology. Apologies are not pass or fail. I always told my students, when giving an apology, any performance lower than an A really doesn't cut it. Half-hearted or insincere apologies are often worse than not apologizing at all, because recipients find them insulting. If you've done something wrong in your dealings with another person, it's as if there's an infection in your relationship. A good apology is like an antibiotic. A bad apology is like rubbing salt in the wound. Working in groups was crucial in my classes, and friction between students was unavoidable. Some students wouldn't pull their load. Others were so full of themselves that they'd belittle their partners. By mid-semester, apologies were always in order. When students wouldn't do it, everything would spin out of control. So I'd often give classes my little routine about apologies. I'd start by describing the two classic bad apologies. I'm sorry. Number 1, I'm sorry you feel hurt by what I've done. This is an attempt at an emotional salve, but it's obvious you don't want to put any medicine in the wound. Number 2, I apologize for what I did, but you also need to apologize to me for what you've done. That's not giving an apology, that's asking for one. Proper apologies have 3 parts. Number 1, what I did was wrong. Number 2, I feel badly that I hurt you. And number 3, how do I make this better? Yes, some people may take advantage of you when answering question 3, but most people will be genuinely appreciative of your make-good efforts. They may tell you how to make it better in some small, easy way, and often they'll work harder to help make things better themselves. Students would say to me, "What if I apologize and the other person doesn't apologize back?" I would tell them, "That's not something you can control, so don't let it eat at you." If other people owe you an apology, and your words of apology to them are proper and heartfelt, you still may not hear from them for a while. After all, what are the odds that they get to the right emotional place to apologize at the exact moment you do? So just be patient. Many times in my career, I saw students apologize, and then several days later their teammates came around. Your patience will be both appreciated and rewarded. Chapter 48. Tell the truth. If I could only give 3 words of advice, they would be, tell the truth. If I got 3 more words, I'd add, all the time. My parents taught me that you're only as good as your word, and and there's no better way to say it. Honesty is not only morally right, it's also efficient. In a culture where everyone tells the truth, you can save a lot of time double-checking. When I taught at the University of Virginia, I loved the honor code. If a student was sick and needed a makeup exam, I didn't need to create a new one. The student just pledged that he hadn't talked to anybody about the exam, and I gave the old one. People lie for lots of reasons, often because it seems like a way to get what they want with less effort. But like many short-term strategies, it is ineffective long-term. You run into people again later, and they remember you lied to them. And they tell lots of other people about it. That's what amazes me about lying. Most people who have told a lie think they got away with it, when in fact, they didn't. Chapter 49. Get in touch with your crayon box. People who know me sometimes complain that I see things in black or white. In fact, one of my colleagues would tell people, "Go to Randy if you want black and white advice, but if you want gray advice, he's not the guy." Okay, I stand guilty as charged, especially when I was younger. I used to say that my crayon box had only two colors in it, black and white. I guess that's why I love computer science, because most everything is true or false. As I've gotten older, though, I've learned to appreciate that a good crayon box might have more than two colors. But I still think that if you run your life the right way, you'll wear out the black and the white before the more nuanced colors. In any case, whatever the color, I love crayons. At my last lecture, I had brought along several hundred of them. I wanted everyone to get one when they walked into the lecture hall, but in the confusion, I forgot to have the folks at the door pass them out. Too bad. My plan was this. As I spoke about childhood dreams, I'd ask everyone to close their eyes and rub their crayons in their fingers to feel the texture, the paper, the wax. Then I'd have them bring their crayons up to their noses and take a good long whiff. Smelling a crayon takes you right back to childhood, doesn't it? I once saw a colleague do a similar crayon routine with a group of people, and it had inspired me. In fact, since then, I've often carried a crayon in my shirt pocket. When I need to go back in time, I put it under my nose and I take another hit. I'm partial to the black crayon and the white crayon, but that's just me. Any color has the same potency. Breathe it in. You'll see. Chapter 50. The $100,000 Salt and Pepper Shaker. When I was 12 years old and my sister was 14, our family went to Disney World in Orlando. Our parents figured we were just old enough to roam a bit around the park without being monitored. In those days before cell phones, Mom and Dad told us to be careful, picked a spot where we would meet 90 minutes later, and then they let us take off. Think of the thrill that was. We were in the coolest place imaginable, and we had the freedom to explore it on our own. We were also extremely grateful to our parents for taking us there, and for recognizing we were mature enough to be by ourselves. So we decided to thank them by pooling our allowances and getting them a present. We went into a store and found what we considered the perfect gift, a ceramic salt and pepper shaker, featuring two bears hanging off a tree, each one holding a shaker. We paid $10 for the gift, headed out of the store, and skipped up Main Street in search of the next attraction. I was holding the gift, and in a horrible instant it slipped out of my hands. The thing broke on impact. My sister and I were both in tears. An adult guest in the park saw what happened and came over to us. "Take it back to the store," she suggested. "I'm sure they'll give you a new one." "I can't do that," I said. "It was my fault. I dropped it. Why would the store give us another one?" "Try anyway," the adult said. "You never know." So we went back to the store, and we didn't lie. We explained what happened. The employees in the store listened to our sad story, smiled at us, and told us we could have a new salt and pepper shaker. They even said it was their fault, because they hadn't wrapped the original salt and pepper shaker well enough. Their message was, our packaging should have been able to withstand a fall due to a 12-year-old's overexcitement. I was in shock. Not just gratitude, but disbelief. My sister and I left the store completely giddy. When my parents learned of the incident, it really increased their appreciation of Disney World. In fact, that one customer service decision over a $10 salt and pepper shaker would end up earning Disney more than $100,000. Let me explain. Years later, as a Disney Imagineering consultant, I would sometimes end up chatting with executives pretty high up the Disney chain of command, and wherever I could, I would tell them the story of the salt and pepper shaker. I would explain how the people in that gift shop made my sister and me feel so good about Disney, and how that led my parents to appreciate the institution on a whole other level. My parents made visits to Disney World an integral part of their volunteer work. They had a 22-passenger bus they would use to drive English as a second language students from Maryland down to see the park. For more than 20 years, my dad bought tickets for dozens of kids to go to Disney World. I went on most of those trips. All in all, since that day, my family has spent more than $100,000 at Disney World on tickets, food, and souvenirs for ourselves and others. When I tell this story to today's Disney executives, I always end it by asking them, if I sent a child into one of your stores with a broken salt and pepper shaker today, would your policies allow your workers to be kind enough to replace it? The executives squirm at the question. They know the answer. Probably not. That's because nowhere in their accounting system are they able to measure how a $10 salt and pepper shaker might yield $100,000. And so it's easy to envision that a child today would be out of luck, sent out of a store with empty hands. My message is this. There is more than one way to measure profits and losses. On every level, institutions can and should have a heart. My mom still has that $100,000 salt and pepper shaker. The day the folks at Disney World replaced it was a great day for us, and not a bad day for Disney. Chapter 51. No job is beneath you. It's been well documented that there is a growing sense of entitlement among young people today. I have certainly seen that in my classrooms. So many graduating seniors have this notion that they should be hired because of their creative brilliance. Too many are unhappy with the idea of starting at the bottom. My advice has always been, you ought to be thrilled you got a job in the mailroom. And when you get there, here's what you do. Be really great at sorting mail. No one wants to hear someone say, I'm not good at sorting mail because the job is beneath me. No job should be beneath us. And if you can't or won't sort mail, where's the proof that you can do anything? After our ETC students were hired by companies for internships or first jobs, we'd often ask the firms to give us feedback on how they were doing. Their bosses almost never had anything negative to say about their abilities or technical chops. But when we did get negative feedback, it was almost always about how the new employees were too big for their britches, or that they were already eyeing the corner offices. When I was 15, I worked at an orchard hoeing strawberries, and most of my coworkers were day laborers. A couple of teachers worked there too, earning a little extra cash for the summer. I made a comment to my dad about the job being beneath those teachers. I guess I was implying that the job was beneath me too. My dad gave me the tongue lashing of a lifetime. He believed manual labor was beneath no one. He said he'd prefer that I worked hard and became the best ditch digger in the world, rather than coasting along as a self-impressed elitist behind a desk. I went back into that strawberry field, and I still didn't like the job, but I'd heard my dad's words. I watched my attitude and hoed a little harder. Chapter 52. Know where you are. Okay, Professor Boy, what can you do for us? That was the greeting I received from M.K. Haley, a 27-year-old Imagineer who was given the job of babysitting me during my sabbatical at Disney. I had arrived in a place where my academic credentials meant nothing. I became a traveler in a foreign land who had to find a way to come up with the local currency, fast. For years, I've told my students about this experience because it's a crucial lesson. Although I had achieved my childhood dream of being an Imagineer, I had gone from being the top dog in my academic research lab to an odd duck in a rough and tumble pond. I had to figure out how my wonky ways could fit in this make-or-break creative culture. I worked on the Aladdin virtual reality attraction then, being tested at Epcot. I joined Imagineers interviewing guests about how they liked the ride. Did they get dizzy, disoriented, nauseated? Some of my new colleagues complained that I was applying academic values that wouldn't work in the real world. They said I was too focused on poring over data, too insistent on approaching things scientifically rather than emotionally. It was hardcore academia, me, versus hardcore entertainment, them. Finally, though, after I figured out a way to save 20 seconds per guest by loading the ride differently, I gained some street cred with those Imagineers who had their doubts about me. The reason I tell this story is to emphasize how sensitive you need to be when crossing from one culture to another. In my students' cases, from school to their first job. As it turned out, at the end of my sabbatical, Imagineering offered me a full-time job. After much agonizing, I turned it down. The call of teaching was too strong. But because I'd figured out how to navigate in both academia and the entertainment industry, Disney found a way to keep me involved. I became a once-a-week consultant to Imagineering, which I did happily for 10 years. If you can find your footing between two cultures, sometimes you can have the best of both worlds. Chapter 53. Never Give Up. When I was a senior in high school, I applied to Brown University and didn't get in. I was on the wait list. I called the admissions office until they eventually decided they might as well accept me. They saw how badly I wanted in. Tenacity got me over the brick wall. When it was time to graduate from Brown, it never occurred to me in a million years to go to graduate school. People in my family got an education and then got jobs. They didn't keep getting an education. But Andy Van Dam, my Dutch uncle and mentor at Brown, advised me, "Get yourself a PhD. Be a professor." "Why should I do that?" I asked him. And he said, "Because you're such a good salesman, and if you go to work for a company, they're going to use you as a salesman. And if you're going to be a salesman, you might as well be selling something worthwhile, like education." I am forever grateful for that advice. Andy told me to apply to Carnegie Mellon, where he had sent a long string of his best students. "You'll get in, no problem," he said. He wrote me a letter of recommendation. The Carnegie Mellon faculty read his glowing letter. They saw my reasonable grades and my lackluster graduate exam scores. They reviewed my application, and they rejected me. I was accepted into other PhD programs, but Carnegie Mellon didn't want me, so I went into Andy's office and dropped the rejection letter on his desk. "I want you to know how much Carnegie Mellon values your recommendation." Within seconds of the letter hitting his desk, he picked up the phone. "I'll fix this. I'll get you in," he said. But I stopped him. "I don't want to do it that way," I told him. So we made a deal. I would check out the schools that accepted me. If I didn't feel comfortable at any of them, I'd come back to him and we'd talk. The other schools ended up being such a bad fit that I soon found myself returning to Andy. I told him I had decided to skip graduate school and get a job. "No, no, no," he said. "You've got to get your PhD, and you've got to go to Carnegie Mellon." He picked up the phone and called Nico Haberman, the head of Carnegie Mellon's computer science department, who also happened to be Dutch. They talked about me in Dutch for a while, and then Andy hung up and told me, "Be in his office at 8 a.m. tomorrow." Nico was a presence, an old-school European-style academic. It was clear our meeting was only happening as a favor to his friend, Andy. He asked me why he should be reconsidering my application, given that the department had already evaluated me. Speaking carefully, I said, "Since the time that I was reviewed, I won a full fellowship from the Office of Naval Research." Nico replied gravely, "Having money isn't part of our admissions criteria. We fund our students out of research grants." And then he stared at me. More precisely, he stared through me. There are a few key moments in anyone's life. A person is fortunate if he can tell in hindsight when they happened. I knew in the moment that I was in one. With all the deference my young, arrogant self could muster, I said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply it was about the money. It's just that they only awarded 15 of these fellowships nationwide, so I thought it an honor that would be relevant, and I apologize if that was presumptuous of me. It was the only answer I had, but it was the truth. Very, very slowly, Nico's frozen visage thawed, and we talked for a few minutes more. After meeting with several other faculty, I ended up being accepted by Carnegie Mellon, and I got my PhD. It was a brick wall surmounted with a huge boost from a mentor and some sincere groveling. Until I got on stage at my last lecture, I had never told students or colleagues at Carnegie Mellon that I had been rejected when I applied there. What was I afraid of? That they'd all think I wasn't smart enough to be in their company? That they would take me less seriously? It's interesting, the secrets you decide to reveal at the end of your life. I should have been telling that story for years, because the moral is, if you want something bad enough, never give up, and take a boost when offered. Brick walls are there for a reason, and once you get over them, even if someone has practically had to throw you over, it can be helpful to others to tell them how you did it. Right, we're back. Trying to get closer to the mic and stay closer to the mic. Like this, kind of. Oh. Chapter 54. Be a communitarian. We've placed a lot of emphasis in this country on the idea of people's rights. That's how it should be, but it makes no sense to talk about rights without also talking about responsibilities. Rights have to come from somewhere, and they come from the community. Sorry, I got a text. Rights have to come from somewhere, and they come from the community. In return, all of us have a responsibility to the community. Some people call this the communitarian movement, but I call it common sense. This idea has been lost on a lot of us, and in my 20 years as a professor, I've noticed more and more students just don't get it. The notion that rights come with responsibilities is literally a strange concept to them. I'd ask students to sign an agreement at the start of each semester, outlining their responsibilities and rights. They had to agree to work constructively in groups, to attend certain meetings, to help their peers by giving honest feedback. In return, they had the right to be in the class and to have their work critiqued and displayed. Some students balked at my agreement. I think it's because we as adults aren't always great role models about being communitarians. For example, we all believe we have a right to a jury trial, and yet many people go to great lengths to get out of jury duty. So I wanted my students to know, everyone has to contribute to the common good. To not do so can be described in one word: selfish. My dad taught this to us by example, but he also looked for novel ways to teach it to others. He did something very clever when he was a Little League baseball commissioner. He had been having trouble rounding up volunteer umpires. It was a thankless job, in part because every time you called a strike or a ball, some kid or parent was sure you got it wrong. There was also the issue of fear. You had to stand there while kids with little or no control flailed their bats and threw wild pitches at you. Anyway, my dad came up with an idea. Instead of getting adults to volunteer, he had the players from older age divisions serve as umpires for the younger kids. He made it an honor to be selected as an ump. Several things happened as a result of this. The kids who became umpires understood how hard a job it was, and hardly ever argued with umpires again. They also felt good that they were lending a hand to the kids in the younger divisions. Meanwhile, the younger kids saw older role models who had embraced volunteering. My dad had created a new set of communitarians. He knew, when we are connected to others, we become better people. Chapter 55. All you have to do is ask. On my dad's last trip to Disney World, he and I were waiting for the monorail with Dylan, who was then 4 years old. Dylan had this urge to sit in the vehicle's cool-looking nose cone with the driver. My theme park-loving father thought that would be a huge kick, too. "Too bad they don't let regular people sit up there," he said. I said. "Actually, Dad, having been an Imagineer, I've learned that there's a trick to getting to sit up front. Do you want to see it?" He said, "Sure." So I walked over to the smiling Disney monorail attendant and said, "Excuse me, could the three of us please sit in the front car?" "Certainly, sir," the attendant said. He opened the gate, and we took our seats beside the driver. It was one of the only times in my life I ever saw my dad completely flabbergasted. "I said there was a trick," I told him, as we sped toward the Magic Kingdom. "I didn't say it was a hard trick." Sometimes, all you have to do is ask. I've always been fairly adept at asking for things. I'm proud of the time I got up my courage and contacted Fred Brooks Jr., one of the most highly regarded computer scientists in the world. After beginning his career at IBM in the 50s, he went on to found the computer science department at the University of North Carolina. He's famous in our industry for saying, among other great things, "Adding manpower to a late software project makes it later." This is now known as Brooks' Law. I was in my late 20s and still hadn't met the man, so I emailed him asking, "If I drive down from Virginia to North Carolina, would it be possible to get 30 minutes of your time to talk?" He responded, "If you drive all the way down here, I'll give you more than 30 minutes. One sec, I need to write down what the good chapters have been. And 55. Okay. Pardon me. Oy. He responded, "If you drive all the way down here, I'll give you more than 30 minutes. He gave me 90 minutes and became a lifelong mentor to me. Years later, he invited me to give a lecture at the University of North Carolina. That was the trip that led to the most seminal moment in my life, when I met Jay. Sometimes all you have to do is ask, and it can lead to all your dreams coming true. These days, given my short road ahead, I've gotten even better at just asking. As we all know, it often takes days to get medical results. Waiting around for medical news is not how I want to spend my time lately. So I always ask, what's the fastest I can get these results? Oh, they often respond, we might be able to have it for you within an hour. Okay then, I say. I'm glad I asked. Ask those questions. Just ask them. More often than you'd suspect. The answer you'll get is, sure. Chapter 56. Make a decision. Tigger or Eeyore? When I told Carnegie Mellon's president, Jared Cohen, that I'd be giving a last lecture, he said, "Please tell them about having fun, because that's what I will remember you for." And I said, I can do that, but it's kind of like a fish talking about the importance of water. I mean, I don't know how not to have fun. I'm dying and I'm having fun. I'm going to keep having fun every day I have left, because there's no other way to play it. I came to a realization about this very early in my life. As I see it, there's a decision we all have to make, and it seems perfectly captured in the Winnie the Pooh characters created by A.A. Milne. Each of us must decide, am I a fun-loving Tigger, or am I a sad sack Eeyore? Pick a camp. I think it's clear where I stand on the great Tigger-Eeyore debate. For my last Halloween, I had great fun. Jay and I dressed up as the Incredibles, and so did our 3 kids. I put a photo of us on my website, letting everyone know what an incredible family we were. The kids looked pretty super. I looked invincible with my fake cartoon muscles. I explained that chemo had not dramatically affected my superpowers, and I got tons of smiling emails in response. I recently went on a short scuba diving vacation with 3 of my best friends. My high school friend, Jack Sheriff, my college roommate, Scott Sherman, and my friend from Electronic Arts, Steve Siebold. We were all aware of the subtext. These were my friends from various times in my life, and they were banding together to give me a farewell weekend. My 3 friends didn't know each other well, but strong bonds formed quickly. All of us are grown men, but for much of the vacation it was as if we were 13 years old, and we were all Tiggers. We successfully avoided any emotional "I love you man" dialogue related to my cancer. Instead, we just had fun. We reminisced, we horsed around, and we made fun of each other. Actually, it was mostly them making fun of me, for the St. Randy of Pittsburgh reputation I've gotten since my last lecture. They know me, and they were having none of it. I won't let go of the Tigger inside me. I just can't see the upside in becoming Eeyore. Someone asked me what I want on my tombstone. I replied, Randy Pausch. He lived 30 years after a terminal diagnosis. I promise you, I could pack a lot of fun into those 30 years, but if that's not to be, then I'll just pack fun into whatever time I do have. Chapter 57. A way to understand optimism. After I learned I had cancer, one of my doctors gave me some advice. It's important, he said, to behave as if you're going to be around a while. I was already way ahead of him. Doc, I just bought a brand new convertible and got a vasectomy. What more do you want from me? Look, I'm not in denial about my situation. I'm maintaining my clear-eyed sense of the inevitable. I'm living like I'm dying. But at the same time, I'm very much living like I'm still living. Some oncologists' offices will schedule appointments for patients 6 months out. For the patients, it's an optimistic signal that the doctors expect them to live. There are terminally ill people who look at the doctor's appointment cards on their bulletin boards and say to themselves, I'm going to make it to that. And when I get there, I'm going to get good news. Herbert Zay, my surgeon in Pittsburgh, says he worries about patients who are inappropriately optimistic or ill-informed. At the same time, he is upset when patients are told by friends and acquaintances that they have to be optimistic or their treatments won't work. It pains him to see patients who are having a tough day health-wise and assume it's because they weren't positive enough. My personal take on optimism is that, as a mental state, it can enable you to do tangible things to improve your physical state. If you are optimistic, you are better able to endure brutal chemo or keep searching for late-breaking medical treatments. Dr. Zay calls me his poster boy for the healthy balance between optimism and realism. He sees me trying to embrace my cancer as another life experience. But I love that my vasectomy doubled as both appropriate birth control and an optimistic gesture about my future. I love driving around in my new convertible. I love thinking I might find a way to become the 1 in a million guy who beats this late-stage cancer. Because even if I don't, it's a better mindset to help me get through each day. And we're back. Sorry, trying to clear my throat. Chapter 58. The Input of Others. Since my last lecture began spreading on the internet, I've been hearing from so many people I've known over the years, from childhood neighbors to long-ago acquaintances, and I'm grateful for their warm words and thoughts. It has been a delight to read notes from former students and colleagues. One coworker recalled advice I gave him when he was a non-tenured faculty member. He said I had warned him to pay attention to any and all comments made by department chairs. He remembers me telling him, when the chair casually suggests that perhaps you might consider doing something, you should visualize a cattle prod. A former student emailed to say I had helped inspire him to create a new personal development website titled Stop Sucking and Live a Life of Abundance, designed to help people who are living far below their potential. That sounded sort of like my philosophy, though certainly not my exact words. And just to keep things in perspective, from the Some Things Never Change department, an unrequited crush from high school wrote to wish me well, and gently reminded me why I was way too nerdy for her back then, also letting slip that she'd gone on to marry a real doctor. More seriously, thousands of strangers also have written to me, and I've been buoyed by their good wishes. Many shared advice on how they and their loved ones have coped with matters of death and dying. A woman who lost her 48-year-old husband to pancreatic cancer said his last speech was to a small audience, her, his children, his parents, and his siblings. He thanked them for their guidance and love, reminisced about the places he had gone with them, and told them what had mattered most to him in life. This woman said counseling had helped her family after her husband died. Knowing what I know now, Mrs. Pouch and your children will have a need to talk, cry, and remember. Another woman whose husband died of a brain tumor when their children were ages 3 and 8 offered insights for me to pass along to Jay. You can survive the unimaginable, she wrote. Your children will be a tremendous source of comfort and love, and will be the best reason to wake up every morning and smile. She went on, take the help that's offered while Randy lives, so you can enjoy your time with him. Take the help that's offered when he's no longer here, so you can have the strength for what's important. Join others who have this kind of loss. They will be a comfort for you and your children. This woman suggested that Jay reassure our kids, as they get older, that they will have a normal life. There will be graduations, marriages, children of their own. When a parent dies at such an early age, some children think that other normal life cycle events may not happen for them either. I heard from a man in his early 40s with serious heart problems. He wrote to tell me about Krishnamurti, a spiritual leader in India who died in 1986. Krishnamurti was once asked, what is the most appropriate thing to say to a friend who was about to die? He answered, tell your friend that in his death a part of you dies and goes with him. Wherever he goes, you also go. He will not be alone. In his email to me, this man was reassuring. I know you are not alone. I have also been moved by comments and good wishes from some well-known people who got in touch as a result of the lecture. For instance, TV news anchor Diane Sawyer interviewed me, and when the cameras were off, helped me think more clearly about the touchstones I'll be leaving for my kids. She gave me an incredible piece of advice. I knew I was going to leave my kids letters and videos, but she told me the crucial thing is to tell them the specific idiosyncratic ways in which I related to them. So I've been thinking a lot about that. I've decided to tell each of my kids things like, "I love the way you tilted back your head when you laughed." I will give them specific stuff they can grasp. And Dr. Reese, the counselor Jay and I see, has helped me find strategies to avoid losing myself in the stress of my periodic cancer scans, so I'm able to focus on my family with an open heart, a positive outlook, and almost all of my attention. I had spent much of my life doubting the effectiveness of counseling. Now, with my back against the wall, I see how hugely helpful it can be. I wish I could travel through oncology wards telling this to patients who are trying to tough it out on their own. Many people have written to me about matters of faith. I have so appreciated their comments and prayers. I was raised by parents who believed that faith was something very personal. I didn't discuss my specific religion in my lecture because I wanted to talk about universal principles that apply to all faiths, to share things I had learned through my relationships with people. Some of those relationships, of course, I have found at church. M.R. Kelsey, a woman from our church, came and sat with me in the hospital every day for 11 days after my surgery. And since my diagnosis, my minister has been very helpful. We belonged to the same swimming pool in Pittsburgh, and the day after I learned my condition was terminal, we were both there. He was sitting by the pool, and I climbed up on the diving board. I winked at him, then did a flip off the board. When I got to the side of the pool, he said to me, "You seem to be the picture of good health, Randy." I told him, "That's the cognitive dissonance. I feel good and look great, but we heard yesterday that my cancer is back, and the doctors say I only have 3 to 6 months." He and I have since talked about the ways I might best prepare for death. "You have life insurance, right?" he said. "Yes, it's all in place," I told him. "Well, you also need emotional insurance," he said. And then he explained that the premiums of emotional insurance would be paid for with my time, not my money. To that end, he suggested that I needed to spend hours of making videotapes of myself with the kids, so they'll have a record of how we played and laughed. Years from now, they will be able to see the ease with which we touched each other and interacted. He also gave me his thoughts on specific things I could do for Jay, to leave her a record of my love. If you cover the premiums on your emotional insurance now while you're feeling okay, there will be less weighing on you in the months ahead, he said. You'll be more at peace. My friends, my loved ones, my minister, total strangers. Every single day, I receive input from people who wish me well and boost my spirits. I've truly gotten to see examples of the best in humanity, and I am so grateful for that. I've never felt alone on this ride I'm taking. End of chapter 58. Section 6. Final Remarks. Chapter 59. Dreams for my children. There are so many things I want to tell my children. Hang on. Excuse me. Excuse me. Ow. Chapter 59. Dreams for my children. There are so many things I want to tell my children, and right now they're too young to understand. Dylan just turned 6. Logan is 3. Chloe is 18 months old. I want the kids to know who I am, what I've always believed in, and all the ways in which I've come to love them. Given their ages, so much of this would be over their heads. I wish the kids could understand how desperately I don't want to leave them. Jay and I haven't even told them yet that I'm dying. We've been advised that we should wait until I'm more symptomatic. Right now, though I've been given just months to live, I still look pretty healthy. And so my kids remain unaware that in my every encounter with them, I am saying goodbye. It pains me to think that when they're older, they won't have a father. When I cry in the shower, I'm not usually thinking, I won't get to see them do this, or I won't get to see them do that. I'm thinking about the kids not having a father. I'm more focused on what they're going to lose than on what I'm going to lose. Yes, a percentage of my sadness is, I won't, but a bigger part of me grieves for them. I keep thinking, they won't. That's what chews me up inside when I let it. I know their memories of me may be fuzzy. That's why I'm trying to do things with them that they'll find unforgettable. I want their recollections to be as sharp as possible. Dylan and I went on a mini vacation to swim with dolphins. A kid swims with dolphins, he doesn't easily forget it. We took lots of photos. I'm going to bring Logan to Disney World, a place that I know he will love as much as I do. He'd like to meet Mickey Mouse. I've met him, so I can make the introduction. Jay and I will bring Dylan along as well, since every experience Logan has these days doesn't seem complete unless he's engaged in the action with his big brother. Every night at bedtime, when I ask Logan to tell me the best part of his day, he always answers, playing with Dylan. When I ask him for the worst part of his day, he also answers, playing with Dylan. Suffice it to say, they are bonded as brothers. I'm aware that Chloe may have no memory of me at all. She's too young. But I want her to grow up knowing that I was the first man ever to fall in love with her. I'd always thought the father-daughter thing was overstated, but I can tell you, it's real. Sometimes she looks at me and I just become a puddle. There are so many things Jay will be able to tell them about me when they're older. She might talk about my optimism, the way I embraced having fun, the high standards I tried to set in my life. She may diplomatically tell them some of the things that made me exasperating, my overly analytical approach to life, my insistence too often that I know best. But she's modest, much more modest than me, and she might not tell the kids this, that in our marriage she had a guy who really deeply, truly loved her. And she won't tell them all the sacrifices she made. Any mother of 3 small children is consumed with taking care of them. Throw in a cancer-stricken husband, and the result is a woman who is always dealing with someone else's needs, not her own. I want my kids to know how selfless she was in caring for all of us. Lately, I've been making a point of speaking to people who lost parents when they were very young. I want to know what got them through the hard times, and what keepsakes have been most meaningful to them. They told me they found it consoling to learn about how much their mothers and fathers loved them. The more they knew, the more they could still feel that love. They also wanted reasons to be proud. They wanted to believe that their parents were incredible people. Some of them sought specifics on their parents' accomplishments. Some chose to build myths, but all had yearnings to know what made their parents special. These people told me something else too. Since they have so few of their own memories of their parents, they found it reassuring to know that their parents died with great memories of them. To that end, I want my kids to know that my memories of them fill my head. Let's start with Dylan. I admire... Let's start with Dylan. I admire how loving and empathetic he is. If another child is hurt, Dylan will bring over a toy or a blanket. Another trait I see in Dylan: he's analytical like his old man. He has already figured out that the questions are more important than the answers. A lot of kids ask, why? 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 One rule in our house is that you may not ask one-word questions. Dylan embraces that idea. He loves to formulate full-sentence questions, and his inquisitiveness goes beyond his years. I remember his preschool teachers raving about him, telling us, when you're with Dylan, you find yourself thinking, I want to see what kind of adult this kid turns into. Dylan is also the king of curiosity. Wherever he is, he's looking somewhere else and thinking, hey, there's something over there. Let's go look at it, or touch it, or take it apart. If there's a white picket fence, some kids will take a stick to it and walk along listening to the thwack, thwack, thwack. Dylan would go one better. He'd use the stick to pry one of the pickets loose, and then he'd use the picket to do the thwacking thing because it's thicker and sounds better. For his part, Logan makes everything an adventure. When he was born, he got stuck in the birth canal. It took 2 doctors pulling with forceps to bring him into the world. I remember one of the doctors, his foot on the table, pulling with all his might. At one point, the doctor turned to me and said, I've got chains and Clydesdales in the back if this doesn't work. It was a tough passage for Logan. Given how cramped he was for so long in the birth canal, his arms weren't moving just after he was born. We were worried, but not for long. Once he started moving, he never really stopped. He's just this phenomenal ball of positive energy, completely physical and gregarious. When he smiles with his whole face. He's the ultimate ticker. He's also a kid who's up for everything and befriends everyone. He's only 3 years old, but I'm predicting he'll be the social chair of his college fraternity. Chloe, meanwhile, is all girl. I say that with a bit of awe, because until she came along, I couldn't fathom what that meant. She was scheduled to be a C-section baby, but Jay's water broke, and not long after we got to the hospital, Chloe just slipped out. That's my description. Jay might say slipped out is a phrase only a man could come up with. Anyway, for me, holding Chloe for the first time, looking into this tiny girl's face, well, it was one of the most intense and spiritual moments of my life. There was this connection I felt, and it was different from the one I had with the boys. I am now a member of the Wrapped Around My Daughter's Finger Club. I love watching Chloe. Unlike Dylan and Logan, who are always so physically daring, Chloe is careful, maybe even dainty. We have a safety gate at the top of our staircase, but she doesn't really need it because all of her efforts go into not getting hurt. Having grown accustomed to 2 boys who rumble their way down any staircase, fearing no danger, this is a new experience for Jay and me. I love all 3 of my kids completely and differently, and I want them to know that I will love them for as long as they live. I will. Given my limited time, though, I've had to think about how I might reinforce my bonds with them. So I'm building separate lists of my memories of each of the kids. I'm making videos so they can see me talking about what they've meant to me. I'm writing letters to them. I also see the video of my last lecture, and this book, too, as pieces of myself that I can leave for them. I even have a large plastic bin filled with mail I received in the weeks after the lecture. Someday, the kids might want to look through that bin, and my hope is that they'll be pleased to find both friends and strangers who had found the talk meaningful. Because I've been so vocal about the power of childhood dreams, some people have been asking lately about the dreams I have for my children. I have a direct answer for that. It can be a very disruptive thing for parents to have specific dreams for their kids. As a professor, I've seen many unhappy college freshmen picking majors that are all wrong for them. Their parents have put them on a train, and too often, judging by the crying during my office hours, the result is a train wreck. As I see it, a parent's job is to encourage kids to develop a joy for life and a great urge to follow their own dreams. The best we can do is to help them develop a personal set of tools for the task. So my dreams for my kids are very exact. I want them to find their own path to fulfillment. And given that I won't be there, I want to make this clear. Kids, don't try to figure out what I wanted you to become. I want you to become what you want to become. Having seen so many students go through my classrooms, I've come to know that a lot of parents don't realize the power of their words. Depending on a child's age and sense of self, an offhand comment from mom or dad can feel like a shove from a bulldozer. I'm not even sure I should have made the reference to Logan growing up to be social chair of a fraternity. I don't want him to end up in college thinking that I expected him to join a fraternity, or to be a leader there, or anything. His life will be his life. I would just urge my kids to find their way with enthusiasm and passion. And I want them to feel as if I am there with them, whatever path they choose. Chapter 60. Jay and Me. As any family dealing with cancer knows, caregivers are often pushed to the sidelines. Patients get to focus on themselves. They are the objects of adulation and sympathy. Caregivers do the heavy lifting, with little time to deal with their own pain and grief. My wife, Jay, is a cancer caregiver with even more on her plate, 3 little kids. So as I prepared to give my last lecture, I made it. If this talk was to be my moment, I wanted some way to show everyone how much I love and appreciate her. It happened like this. Near the end of the lecture, as I reviewed the lessons I'd learned in my life, I mentioned how vital it is to focus on other people, not just yourself. Looking off stage, I asked, "Do we have a concrete example of focusing on somebody else over there? Could we bring it out?" Because the day before had been Jay's birthday, I arranged to have a large birthday cake with a single candle waiting on a rolling table off stage. As the cake was wheeled out by Jay's friend, Clea Schluter, I explained to the audience that I hadn't given Jay a proper birthday and thought it might be nice if I could get 400 people to sing to her. They applauded the idea and began singing. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Realizing some might not know her name, I quickly said, "Her name is Jay." Happy birthday, dear. Whoops, that was terrible. The music's distracting me. Happy birthday, dear Jay. It was so wonderful. Even people in the nearby overflow room watching the lecture on a video screen were singing. As we all sang, I finally allowed myself to look at Jay. She sat in her front row seat, wiping away tears, with a surprised smile on her face, looking so lovely, bashful and beautiful, pleased and overwhelmed. There are so many things Jay and I are discussing as we work to come to terms with what her life will be like after I'm gone. Lucky is a strange word to use to describe my situation, but a part of me does feel fortunate that I didn't get hit by the proverbial bus. Cancer has given me the time to have these vital conversations with Jay that wouldn't be possible if my fate were a heart attack or a car accident. What are we talking about? For starters, we both try to remember that some of the best caregiving advice we've ever heard comes from flight attendants. Put on your own oxygen mask before assisting others. Jay is such a giver that she often forgets to take care of herself. When we become physically or emotionally run down, we can't help anybody else, least of all small children. So there's nothing weak or selfish about taking some fraction of your day to be alone, recharging your batteries. In my experience as a parent, I found it hard to recharge in the presence of small children. Jay knows that she'll have to give herself permission to make herself a priority. I've also reminded her that she's going to make mistakes, and to just accept that. If I were able to live, we'd be making those mistakes together. Mistakes are part of the process of parenting, and she shouldn't attribute them all to the fact that she'll be raising the kids herself. Some single parents fall into the trap of trying to compensate by giving the kids material things. Jay knows no material possessions can make up for a missing parent, and they can actually do harm in establishing a kid's values. It's possible that Jay, like many parents, will find the most challenging years to be when the kids become teenagers. Having been around students all my life, I'd like to think I would come into my own as a father of teens. I'd be tough, but I'd understand the mindset. So I'm sorry I won't be there to help Jay when the time comes. The good news, though, is that other people, friends and family, will also want to help, and Jay plans to let them. All children need a fabric of people in their lives who love them, and that's especially true for kids who've lost a parent. I think back to my own parents. They knew they couldn't be the only crucial influences in my life. That's why my dad signed me up to play football with Jim Graham. Jay will be on the lookout for some Coach Grahams for our kids. As for the obvious question, well, here's my answer. Most of all, I want Jay to be happy in the years ahead. So if she finds happiness through remarriage, that will be great. If she finds happiness without remarrying, that also will be great. Jay and I work hard at our marriage. We've gotten so much better at communicating, at sensing each other's needs and strengths, and at finding more things to love about each other. So it saddens us that we won't get to experience this richness in our marriage for the next 30 or 40 years. We won't get to amortize the hard efforts we've put in so far. Still, we wouldn't trade our 8 years of marriage for anything. I know that so far I've been handling my diagnosis pretty well. Jay has too. As she says, no one needs to cry for me. She means it. But we want to be honest too. Though counseling has helped tremendously, we've had some tough times. We've cried together in bed, fallen back asleep, woken up and cried more. We've gotten through in part by focusing on the tasks at hand. We can't fall to pieces. We've got to get some sleep, because one of us has to get up in the morning and give the kids breakfast. That person, for the record, is almost always Jay. I recently celebrated my 47th birthday, and Jay had to wrestle with the question, what do you get the man you love for his last birthday? She opted for a watch and a big screen TV. Though I'm not a fan of TV, it's mankind's greatest time waster, the gift was completely appropriate, since since I'll be in bed so much at the end. TV will be one of my last links to the outside world. There are days when Jay tells me things, and there's little I can say in response. She has told me, I can't imagine rolling over in bed and you're not there, and I can't picture myself taking the kids on vacation and you not being with us. And, Randy, you were always the planner. Who's going to make the plans? I'm not worried. Jay will make the plans just fine. I really had no idea what I would do or say after the audience sang happy birthday to Jay, but as I urged her onto the stage and she came toward me, a natural impulse overtook me. Her too, I guess. We embraced and we kissed, first on the lips, then I kissed her cheek. The crowd kept applauding. We heard them, but it was like they were miles away. As we held each other, Jay whispered something in my ear. Please don't die. It sounds like Hollywood dialogue, but that's what she said. I just hugged her more tightly. End of chapter 60. Coming. Oh, we've had another viewer. I'll be right back. say that. Final chapter. Chapter 61. The dreams will come to you. For days I had worried that I would be unable to get through the final lines of my lecture without choking up. So I had a contingency plan. I placed the last few sentences of the talk on 4 slides. If, in the moment on stage, I couldn't bring myself to say the words, my plan was to click silently through the slides and then simply say, "Thank you for coming today." I had been on stage for just over an hour. Given the chemo side effects, the long stretch on my feet, and the emotions involved, I was truly feeling spent. At the same time, I felt at peace and fulfilled. My life had come full circle. I had first made the list of my childhood dreams when I was 8 years old. Now, 38 years later, that very list had helped me to say what I needed to say and carried me through. Many cancer patients say their illness gives them a new and deeper appreciation for life. Some even say they are grateful for their disease. I have no such gratitude for my cancer, although I'm certainly grateful for having advance notice of my death. In addition to allowing me to prepare my family for the future, that time gave me the chance to go to Carnegie Mellon and give my last lecture. In a sense, it allowed me to leave the field under my own power. And my list of childhood dreams had continued to serve so many purposes. Without it, who knows if I would have been able to thank all the people who deserved my thanks. Ultimately, that little list had allowed me to say goodbye to those who meant so much to me. There's something else. As a high-tech guy, I never fully understood the artists and actors I've known and taught over the years. They would sometimes talk about the things inside them that needed to come out. I thought that sounded self-indulgent. I should have been more empathetic. My hour on stage had taught me something. At least I was still learning. I did have things inside me that desperately needed to come out. I didn't give the lecture just because I wanted to. I gave the lecture because I had to. I also knew why my closing lines would be so emotional for me. It was because the end of the talk had to be a distillation of how I felt about the end of my life. As I wound down, I had taken a minute to review some of the key points of the lecture, and then I offered a summation, but with a twist. A surprise ending, if you will. So today's talk was about achieving childhood dreams, I said. But did you figure out the head fake? I paused. The room was quiet. It's not about how to achieve your dreams. It's about how to lead your life. If you lead your life the right way, the karma will take care of itself. The dreams will come to you. I clicked to the next slide, and a question filled the large screen. Have you figured out the second head fake? I took a breath. I decided to speak at a slightly faster clip than I had before. Maybe if I just talked faster, I thought, I could get through it. I repeated the words on screen. Have you figured out the second head fake? Then I told them the talk wasn't just for those in the room. It was for my kids. I clicked to the very last slide. A photo of me standing by our swing set, holding a smiling Logan with my right arm, and sweet Chloe with my left, Dylan sitting happily on my shoulders. The end.